Today we're taking a look at Judges Guild Installment S from June of 1978. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer. This is our channel, Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who like classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything that goes with it. Today we continue our look at the products of Judges Guild with the bi-monthly installments that were sent to subscribers. This one from June of 1978. And it contained the products Citadel of Fire, a Dungeons & Dragons adventure, and the Judges Guild Journal, Issue S. Hope you enjoyed the video. Our series continues today, looking at the installments that were sent to the subscribers of Judges Guild. This, again, as I mentioned, was from June of 1978. You were going to get this really excellent D&D adventure from created by Mark Summerlot called Citadel of Fire. It is... Let's look here, about 30 pages. This is the first printing of that. And then you got the newspaper. There'll be one more issue after today that comes out in the newspaper format, and then they switch to what they're calling a magazine format, or a, sort of module size, right? So we open up our newspaper here and read through it. A really nice format. Remember, they did this because it was fairly cheap. Compared to nicer paper or whatever that they might do. They could basically get you more product for less money, right? And that was one of the things they talked about as a goal, was to give as much information and ideas to the referees for a economic price, rather than make these products really expensive and then more people maybe couldn't afford them, or they'd have less pages or whatever, right? That was the way they decided to go. And as we'll see, I think the people who subscribe to Judges Guild agree with that approach. So let's take a look at what we got in this installment. Bob Bledsoe continues to be obviously the person who's running Judges Guild and primarily responsible for the journal. Mark Summerlot is primarily responsible for Citadel of Fire. If you bought this outside of the subscription from the booty list on Judges Guild, it'd be $3.50. You get Installment S, which was 2 parts, the journal, the Citadel of Fire, and that was it. Let's take a look at our Judges Guild Journal. Interesting note to me, at the top it now says dedicated to swords and sorcery fantasy gaming, and the D&D reference, which was very explicit up there, is now gone. Circulation still 2,200. And you'll notice, I think if you are like me and you like the Star Wars movies, there's a very familiar image there. That is Chewbacca. Their fascination with Star Wars, sort of superimposed on top of all of this D&D fantasy role-playing stuff, continues. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. So the headline today is Gods, Mini-Gods, and Hermits Feedback. This was for whatever reason, they titled their survey last time. And so they start off today with their response to that. You remember, they asked people essentially like, what do you like? What do you think we should do? Are we doing a good job? That kind of stuff. And they said, they basically gave the most popular answer. So I think back from my grade school math days, this was the mode, the answer that appeared most often. Remember that mean, median, and mode? So most of our responses, the largest number of responses came from people 24 years old. The vast majority were male, 16 years or more of education, which means at least 4 years of college, right? And the upper end of that was 47 years old and 24 years of education. I'm not saying, maybe we'll get into it in a minute. There might have been some people making up some answers here. Generally, people play with groups of 4 to 8. The largest was 14. 2 to 8 hours a month. 60 hours in a month was the top. And then they also played simulation war games, miniature war games, and board games. People liked their products. Their most popular products were Teagle Manor, City State of the Invincible Overlord, and Village Book 1, which perhaps was because it just came out. And then Thunderhold, Modron, Thieves of Badabaskor, and the Gen Con 9 dungeon, and then finally the maps for the Barbarian Altanus Glowworm Steppes and the Valenturanus maps. In terms of what the people who read wanted to see from Judges Guild, playability, reality simulation, graphic aesthetics, literary aesthetics, and grammatical accuracy. They don't want to only see their role-playing games being based on sort of medieval European. They want to see other things brought in as well. They said the things they like the most: dungeons, maps, descriptions, magic, monsters, tactical suggestions, towns, campaign suggestions, formats, and counters. And I thought this was interesting. They said, what are your favorite miniatures? And they said, in order, Ral Partha, Grenadier, and Heritage. Average gaming time per week, 15 hours. Someone said they gamed 80 hours a week. I think they might have been making that up. Most gamers own between 1 and 10 games. Someone says they own 290 games. And they said, who would you like us to talk about or get information or do an interview with? No surprise, Gary Gygax is on the list. And then Tim Kask, M.A.R. Barker, Dave Arneson, Ursula Le Guin, Dave Hargrave of Arduin fame, L. Sprague de Camp, Bill Owen, and Bob Bledsoe, Fritz Lieber, Lynn Lakofka gets the shout out, Michael Moorcock, and many others. And the readers say that movie information is low on their priority. No surprise, these guys are a little too in love with Star Wars. And so from now on, he says, we'll just put it in there to fill space. We won't devote full pages to talking about Star Wars or other movies. And then what do you like? The reader letters were the most favorite thing, followed by game reviews, the Judges Guild business policies, interesting, coming conventions, then book reviews, judges roster, which is the list of DMs, movie information, omniscient opinions, Turtle Dragon Castle, and Brian Hennon's stories. People liked it. They liked the magazine. I think we're doing a good job. We're well run, and they tend to share it with 1 to 3 people, and they basically like the way that this is being produced, although they do say they probably prefer going from the newspaper to more of a magazine format, right? Folded paper, staples, and so forth. So here we go. And you may remember they started advertising lifetime subscriptions to the journal rather than annual. I think it was $70. And they said they're getting lots of those. And so this will, the journal subscription mailing concept, it continues until the beginning of 1981. So that's a pretty good long run that people got there. Here are our staff members, and I just throw that up there to show you it's getting a little bit bigger each issue. This was the full article on everything people liked. Here is a new person added this time, a guy named Dave Saring, who is a draftsman, illustrator, and product designer. And then we have shrewd slants from the Sagacious Sage with some suggestions about people advancing in levels. It said that the average grind of just going in, may become a little monotonous and boring, and so you want to come up with some unique ideas. Maybe it's a special monster or a unique type of encounter that they will need to go to along the way. And he said, don't also forget that you might have people joining up with NPCs or helping NPCs. That's another way to get people involved. And of course, a lot of folks might decide to, with the original concept, right, which was have your own little barony, build a wizard's tower, fighters, stronghold, keep, right? And then you've got all those issues of protecting your property, your land holdings, and the people that live there from outside invaders. So now you've got to keep up men-at-arms, you've got to worry about the economics and so forth. And he said, so there's all kinds of new ideas, new challenges besides just going into a dungeon and trying to kill monsters. So he says that's going to be something to pay attention to. That can be a really interesting thing to add to your campaign. And the other thing he says, of course, is you want to add in some memorable NPCs who are going to survive from adventure to adventure or campaign to campaign session to session, because they really help round out the world that people live in and create some real interest. And he says, finally, this is interesting, I think. Never make the mistake of thinking that any beings within the wilderness are more important than your players. He said, listen, the judge is a lot like an author, but whether a novel is concerned with peasants or trying to make sure the crops come in, the war between emperors, the central characters always dominate the book. They are the book. Their story is the book. The adventures of the players are the purpose for which your encounters are created. And so the players should be involved whenever possible so the game is enjoyable to both you as the judge, referee, dungeon master, and your players. And his mantra, the judge only wins when the players enjoy the game. That's pretty good, I think, universal. Okay, now we have 2 articles from Len Lakofka. The first one is what has a figure experienced? And his idea here is that your character has knowledge of things in the world. He or she's come across these things before, read about these things, seen these things. You know, they didn't just spring into existence the first day they went on an adventure. And so he's got a chart. Whenever you find something, +1 sword, boots of speed, potions, other types of magical items, whatever it might be, he said there should be some chance that different characters may have either heard of this thing before, seen this thing before, maybe even used this thing before. And so, as opposed to basically having no knowledge of, basically knowing 0% about everything, right? He also includes this with monsters that you encounter. And so I think the way I read this or interpreted this was you're going through a dungeon and, the dungeon master describes a creature. And a character might, in Len's world, would say, does my character recognize this or have any idea what this thing is? And then in his world, you would, if it wasn't something you knew that they'd encountered before, you would roll this chart and say, yes, in fact, your character recognizes this as a bugbear, whatever it might be. Depending on how familiar you are, you might know things like special attacks or weaknesses, immunities, those kind of things, the kind of stuff that's in the monster manual. And it's probably a much better way to address that than the either A, characters know 0, or B, metagaming, your character knows whatever your player has memorized. So I thought that was interesting. And the way he does it, you got the level, here's a chart with the level of your character and then the class of the item or the creature or the spell. And he has them group 1 to group 10. And so the higher your level, you're better your percentage chance of knowing something, and the higher the level of the thing, the lower, right? So if your first level, it looks like the most you could know something about is going to be a 4th level item, whether that would be, and he has examples on here like polymorphing wands, 4th level spells, monsters with 4 hit dice or less, ring of spell storing, shield +2, weapon +3, aligned swords, special wands like value, negation, fear, or other, magic horns, wights, wraiths, minor devils. And so, just as some examples, and so those are level or group 4. And so you only have a 1% chance at first level to know anything about that stuff. Whereas if you were, let's say 8th level, you've got a 50% chance to know about all those things. The very first time you encounter them in the game, the chance that you've picked up some information about that somewhere outside of game time. I thought that was an interesting idea. Len has another article called The Contents of Things. And basically this is, again, we've seen charts like this before, where you're going to roll to see what's in somewhere, right? So he has rooms, common bedroom furnishings, checked for each item. And it's pictures, mirrors, chairs, mugs, chests, tables, beds, and you roll the percent chance that something's in there, and then some of those things have sub charts to roll more detail about it. And then he has the uncommon bedroom furnishings for private or semi-private rooms, and there's a 40% chance of an item. And so again, you would roll to see whether or not these things were going to be in that room. They has different charts for kitchens, dining rooms, studies, libraries, expensive rooms, like well-furnished rooms for some nobleman or something like that. Also for miscellaneous things that might be in a den, private chamber, laboratory. He has a chart for the lighting that you're going to find in your room, things to find inside of wardrobes or closets, lockers or chests. And again, just a chart for you to use if you want a little help or inspiration coming up with ideas of what to include. Interestingly, there's this article by Tom Holsinger on fighting skills for warriors and clerics, where they don't. Remember, and you'll remember this article because it was in a prior issue. I'm not sure why it was reprinted here, but this is about giving basically like proficiency points to characters when they start out, and that they gain them over time as well. Tom Holsinger has a second article in here. This one's called Tavern and Urban Encounters. I thought it was interesting ideas and inspiration, but it was really, I think, not well organized. It's like he had a bunch of charts and they just got cut and pasted all over the place without any logic to them. So the first thing he has is the time of your encounter, which doesn't make any sense because it seems to me like you would use these when your characters are going into, a tavern at 8 p.m. That's when the encounter is going to happen. You can't roll it up at 1 p.m. The characters might not be there. So I didn't really understand why there was the time of the encounter in here. He's got all these charts that aren't numbered. Some of them aren't a number that you could use a die from D&D to get to because they might be 7 or 5, whatever. And I guess you can roll something and figure out how to do it. But what's going on in the tavern? Eating, getting drunk, watching entertainment, gambling, socializing, gossiping, making plans, being seduced, looking for trouble. Places where you're trying to be. Like I guess you're encountering someone on the way. I'm trying to go to a tavern, stables, house of ill repute, guild hall, shop market, etc. There's a chart for experience of soldiers, type of tavern encounter, which are you encounter a group of adventurers, potential employee and potential employer, guild members, local soldiers, curious and adventurous locals, riffraff, mercantile, or other. And there are charts for each of those sort of randomly stuck around on the next page and a half of the journal. Information for more particularly about what each of those type of groups might entail, who your group leader is, what the class, what the level of the leader is, if it's employees or employers, what kind of person they are, level, what kind of thing they want you to do, and so on and so forth. Again, really one of the most, I'll be critical about this, but disorganized and difficult to figure out how to use articles has been in here. You can tell that there's been a lot of thought to put all these charts together, but there wasn't enough thought, or else it got lost in the editing of how to have someone pick this up and use it without having to sit there and have sort of some brain damage trying to figure it all out on their own. Okay, so our next is prodigious plate mail. These are the letters to the letters, but actually end up being more like small articles. So the first thing this guy, Ronald Mark Pear, wants to tell you about using NPCs as players. And you may remember Ronald Mark Pear's name. He was a contributor to the Oracle, which we've done, those. I'll put a tag up here for the Oracle if you want to go look at that fanzine series that we did, and he was a contributor there as well. He's, an essential element of a good D&D world are the NPCs. So obviously I create those as the referee. I control them, and they can become some really important members of the character's game world experience. Sometimes, he says, the NPCs might stick around and survive longer than the characters because they might be getting killed so quickly that the players actually have a stronger connection to this NPC I've created than their own character who's been rolled up now for the 4th time. And he says it can make also an interesting dynamic because unlike hirelings or mercenaries, these people are going to be treated as equal members of the party. They get equal reward, just like the other characters. They can be higher level, so maybe they're like the leader, and taking your low-level people on what would be a more challenging adventure than they can handle, gives them quests to do, or maybe has the connections of something that's more interesting than what they might find on their own. He might be able to, he or she can help the party, right? Because they're stronger, higher level. Also, it could be a lower level, more of a junior apprentice type that's going along with the party. Totally up to the role of the referee, the judge, dungeon master, and what happens as your campaign develops over time. He said, but don't sell them short. They can become really, really important parts of the campaign. I think that's absolutely true. He also says, your NPCs could be monsters, and he says so. One of his tendencies is to say if it's an intelligent monster, wherever you encounter it, whether it's in a dungeon, in the wilderness, it's not going to attack. It's probably going to it might leave, it might try to talk to the party, and he says that he finds that gives the encounters a lot more depth to them than if it's just a basically stat block that attacks every single time. Along those lines, he says, here are some NPCs I've developed in my home campaign, and I'm going to give you a little bit of information about them. And this is just a few. He's got in the newspaper, he's got a full page and a half plus a little extra of these. So here's just a few. So, and you can see the guy's name's Hawk. He is a ranger, lawful good. Let's see, first level, 5 armor class, has a +1 sword, and the stats across the top: strength, intelligence, wisdom, constitution, dexterity, and charisma. I'm not sure why he's got constitution, dexterity flipped like that, but sometimes in the early books I think that's how people did it. We've got Chanson, the bard, Ox, the fighter, Snake, who is a druid, and Priapus, who's a half-elf thief. He's got a little blurb, right? Just 1-2 sentences about him, one after another. And again, you've seen that in a few different fanzines as well, this idea of giving people some really good base, just a little bit of texture around it, right, for these NPCs. So I like that article quite a bit. Okay, Paul Miller's got an article on demon summoning because, and maybe in fairness, right, he's aware that magic users sooner or later, some are going to try and do this. So he has rules for that. He says you're going to need the help of some type of demoness witch. He says see Judges Guild issue 7, but someone more advanced than the person trying to do it probably. He's got a rule here where you bring you will be given something you have to bring to the demoness as an offering, and then depending on how satisfied she is by that, you could get a plus or a minus on your summoning roll. So he's got a chart for the different things you might have to get: fangs of a vampire, a living sample of living green slime, a giant spider, umber hulk eyes, Pegasus wings, dragon's tongues, magic items, etc. Then there's just a random roll to how happy the demoness is with what you've brought back, which seems a little harsh if it's something hard to get, and a lot of those things are pretty hard to get. You get a bonus of 5%. You have to be at least 9th level, and so then you get a bonus of 5% every level over that. So 11th level, for example, is a plus 10% on your chance to successfully summon. So you get those 2 bonuses, the demoness's reaction bonus and potentially your level bonus. That gives you your chance to successfully do the summoning. And then once it comes, you get a reaction from the demon, everything from enraged to completely under your control, and which would even allow you to modify your tasks. Essentially, you summon it and you give it a task, and you'll get modifications again, depending on what it is. Going after a lawful person, plus 10%, destroying something, 50%, and then how long is this going to take? Less than a day, plus 10%, 1 to 4 days, 5%. Over a month, minus 15%, right? Guarding objects, minus 5%. Finding you an object, minus, I think it's minus 10%. That's the way I'm reading that chart. And then the type of a demon, type 1 is the easiest, so it's going to give you a 20% bonus to that favorability reaction all the way up to the demon princes, which will be negative. And so anyway, you roll. Bad things can happen. They can leave. They can be hostile and stay and attempt to kill you, attack you, or may be controlled, and it may actually be willing to serve. So that's how that works. It's, I think, pretty well done, for what he set out to do, for sure. Next, we have an article sent in where someone wants to talk about aerial adventures, and mentions that you have both land and water, and also you should consider the air. Creatures like cloud giants, storm giants, other things might have castles or some type of thing that's up in the air, and obviously you're going to have to figure out how to fly to get there. And combat can be a little tricky, but he's encouraging DMs to think about using encounters up in the air as well. We've got a little bit of a love fest here. 4 different people who wrote in just basically to tell them how much they enjoyed everything that Judges Guild was putting together and how happy they were with the products they got in their subscription. Okay, and then here's this guy who says he's got this little flow chart that he uses for a scenario. This particular one is a solo adventure for a thief to get a little adventuring time while the wizard's researching spells and the fighter's off training. And he says you've heard that there's going to be rich merchant's going to be away from home, and that his second floor window is an opportunity to get in where there's a chest. And so he starts here and says, well, do you want to go to the back door? You want to go up to the window? And then you choose. And he just basically has a flow chart for the DM to guide through the things you're going to have to do, the thief skills you're going to have to use, the potential traps or consequences that are going to happen as you go along. And finally, we've got someone who writes in and says he wants to encourage people to think about using trolls in their campaign, including allowing trolls to be something that people encounter. Here he's got 2 types, dark trolls and cave trolls. Dark trolls are the thin trolls who live in the dark in caves, and they're affected by sunlight, like in Tolkien. And then you have hill trolls, which can live outside, and these are trolls like in the Terry Brooks's Shannara world. So they live out in the sunshine, they can talk, they are more neutral aligned, and while not necessarily going to be huge fans of your adventuring party, are not necessarily going to just try to eat you when they see you. So he wants to encourage people to think about using both of those types of trolls in their campaign. And in fact, he even thinks the second type of trolls would be potentially something that could be a character class for your campaign. Oops. Here we go with some suggestions. And the first one is on armor damage, and I've seen this before. It's kind of interesting concept, and basically he says every 10 points of damage takes a point off of your armor class. So let's say you had chainmail armor class 5, take 10 points of damage. That's going to be, some of that damage is presumed not really absorbed because you still take the hit points damage, but it's going to mean there was damage done to your armor, and so now it's armor class 6. Another 10 points of damage, now it's armor class 7, and so on. He says when you have magical armor, that adds an extra 10. So the first 10 points of damage that you take sort of are absorbed by the magic and don't actually harm the armor. And then beyond that, the armor is getting harmed. You're going to have to go into town and get somebody to fix the armor, or at some point the armor just basically becomes worthless in your armor class 10. Then the second thing that he has is his quick charts for empty rooms, and he just has these 2 D20 charts. What's in this room? This is assuming it's going to be empty. Just clothes on the floor, offal and bones, a dead fighter, a table with food, chains, a robe, just some blood, water, a cave-in, crossbow trap aimed at the door, metal, sacks, bones, green liquid, dust, naked body, empty chest. And then he's got a second one with some other things, similar things: person in a robe, empty coffin, dirt, stools, cracked walls, cracked ceiling, tombstones, big cave-in, bunch of water, basin of water on the floor, insects on the floor, snake skins, shelf with flasks. I like the charts quite a bit, and it's always good to have 2 things, I think, here, right? 1, every room shouldn't have a monster in it, and 2, it kind of keeps your players honest. Like, are they really going to search every single room they come to? And it forces them to make that decision. And as he says, sometimes there has to be something in that room of value, because if they are searching, sooner or later they should find out that there might be something to find. And he has another set of charts, one D20 chart for your corridors, your hallways. Same thing. You can have dead body, cave-in, cracks in the wall, water, liquid, things on the floor, etc. Just to add a little more random interest to the dungeon as you go along. Jim England, our former librarian, has some more information this time about some fantasy literature. He was at the American Library Association annual convention, and he met Anne McCaffrey, who wrote The Dragon Riders of Pern, and her first 5 books were out at this point, and he goes through and gives you a little bit of a blurb about each of those, and of course encourages you to read those, thinks those are good books. Here's our list of Dungeon Masters. Ronald Purr is on there. No group this time, just a bunch of individuals. Then we get our notes from Turtle Dragon Castle by Stephen Huff, and you'll remember this was one of the least popular things in the survey. And so he says one of the most popular things, or decisive things, or unique things in a fantasy campaign is magic. It differentiates a fantasy game from other types of role-playing games. And so our magic must be understood and clearly defined so that you can have appropriate balance in your campaign. And the gist of his article here is essentially you got to be careful not to have too much magic in your campaign, whether it's the magic items or spells that you give to your characters or that other people have. He said, it can really unbalance a campaign, especially if you let magic sort of get out of control. So he advocates sort of tight limitations on magic. Don't be overly liberal with what magic can do, and instead be rather constrained. Erring on the side of less is better in terms of both the presence of magic and the sort of the strength of what people can do with their magic in the campaign. And I think he's a little bit correct. It's sort of like, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. If you start giving out a lot of magic or let people get used to using magic in sort of wild and fanciful ways that can have dramatic consequences on the world around them, your players are going to get used to that sort of funhouse, Monty Hall style. We have our booty list. We're up to item 69. These items, you may notice, only take us up to 65, but we have some items that are not coming out in the subscription service. And those are things like Sea Steeds and Wave Riders, which is for naval-based battles. The Fantastic Wooderlands Beyond, which we'll talk about on a separate video. Warcry and Battle Lust, a set of miniature rules. And Flotilla 1, which are the some of the products, a subset of the product that comes in Sea Steeds, where you're going to get these ships that are sort of drawn on the paper, as well as some rules, but Flotilla 1's just going to give you the drawings of the ships. Then we had just a little bit of advertisement. There used to be like 5 pages of advertisement, and that's gone now. So we've got this little advertisement for Space Squadrons. And we've got another picture from Star Wars. Very famous scene with Tarkin and Princess Leia and Darth Vader. And here is our rear cover, and we've just got the Judges Guild staff listed here and a little bit of artwork. In here, this is the back cover. We have the staff listed at the top and some artwork. And speaking of artwork, let's take a look at the artwork that's in here again. Cheryl England does a lot of this artwork. This looks like a pirate on a ship to me. We've got a little cartoon here, Scrolls and Magic, and it says booked at the bottom, and a gigantic book has squashed this person. And then we have some just little drawings around up here at the top. We've got this one was a header for one of the articles, and then a little cartoon here by Pixie Bledsoe of these owls playing D&D, it looks like, and a little picture of a ship, which is a sort of like clip art that was stuck in an article. And then in part of this that talked about aerial combat, we've got this little creature of some sort, a little demon imp-looking creature. And then over here on the other side, we've got this silhouetted figure on horseback riding through a rocky desert-type area. So that's it for the journal. Now we're going to focus on this adventure, Citadel of Fire, a Dungeons & Dragons adventure that was created by Mark Summerlot. So this cover here is on the, this is a first printing. There's a second printing that has the same cover, and then there's a third printing which it comes up here in color. And so You see the price here, $3, approved for D&D right on the front. Get the Tower of Stone, some eerie looking eyes peering out, a couple wyverns that are coming out up top, I would say, based on what's in the actual adventure. And then there's like this closet down here at the bottom left, which is very similar to the drawings in the monster manual. Here's our credits for this. Basically, Mark Summerlot did this, although Bob Bledsoe in some places I see gets some credit for it as well. So you have the hex map system, right? And so here's the hex that you would drop down on one of the hexes wherever you want to place this in your campaign. And this is sort of zoomed in to show you the detail as you're coming up onto the top where the tower is. Here's your background. This is an ancient wizard's tower, okay? Ages ago, a wizard named Nrothax the Black, came here. He discovered there's a sort of a magical vortex spot, a lot of eldritch energy, and so he did a summoning, and all in one night he summoned these demons who came out and built this tower for him out of a black stone that came from sort of the underworld, from that the demons brought and used to build it. So the wizard moves into the tower. He's bad guy, bad stuff is happening there. Then after a couple of years, he summons a goblin king named Trenog and asks him to start building or digging dungeon levels under the tower. Okay, and so he lives there for 200 years, and the goblins sort of live underneath, and he sort of lives in the tower. He dies. His son Dwinar takes over. He lives there for 300 years. Another evil wizard. Two important things that happen during his campaign. One, or during his reign, he adds more dungeon levels, deeper, and expands the ones that are already there, including an area called the Arena, more treasure, more storage. And then he also did a raid and started enslaving the nearby population around the tower. He dies. The next evil wizard who takes over is called Tall Oxbell. He dies at the hands of a demon, it says, and it passes on down through the years. And I think they say there were 7 times that ownership has been passed down since Tall Oxbell. And now the current wizard in charge is called Ramog. And each of them holds a staff called the Staff of Nrothax, the original wizard. And so you know that powerful magic item is going to be in the tower, as well as a bunch of bad guys. It's not clear if this is the dungeon master's background, just so you know, or if you're supposed to share this to some extent with the players. Obviously, every referee can make up her own mind about that. I've actually played through part of this with the party just to kind of see how it went, and I thought it went pretty well. Here are the stats, a little drawing of this wizard. This is Ramog, the lawful evil 15th level wizard, and they give you the spells that he happens to have memorized. So here is a really unique and interesting thing about this adventure. Apparently the suggestion came from Tim Kask. So these 2 pages, charts, on the random location of where the wizard will be when the adventuring party comes to the tower, right? So, and interestingly, everybody else is pretty much in like a spot, in the room description when you get there. But the wizard is not in a particular place. And so you roll a d20, and it tells you where he's going to be, all these different rooms within the tower or even maybe in the dungeon. And then you roll to see what is he doing, and you've got a d20 roll. Is he sleeping, feasting, doing toiletry, tending to his toiletries, lounging, partying, inspecting, ceremony, studying, exploring, hunting, visiting, in a trance, interrogating, experimenting, practicing, snacking, meeting, meditating, dictating, or sitting in state. And then for each of those 20 things that he would be doing at the time the party comes along, there is another column of things to roll, more particularly. For example, if he's hunting, well, what is he hunting for? Roll d20. If he's exploring, well, where is he out exploring? Roll d20. He's studying. What is he studying, right? Including the most embarrassing thing, which is if he's attending to his toiletries, Well, what is he doing in there? It has everything from shaving, bathing, and anything else you can imagine to be going on in there. He might be getting some sort of a sauna treatment. He might be taking care of his very personal business. For whatever reason, they felt the need to have that level of detail and that particular choice too, among the things that might be going on when you show up. But so it was really smart of Tim, and I think generally Tim Kask is right. The idea that the dungeon or the tower, or whatever, is alive and people are moving around is really, really good. And I've seen that done by other people in other scenarios, adventures. So they try to create that idea that people are moving and living, and it's not just sort of sitting there waiting for you to open the door, right? But they only do it here with the wizard. But maybe that's just a start. Again, this is early on, right? This is 78. So the tower is 5 levels, and the circles down here at the bottom show you the tower. So it's pretty simple, not a lot of rooms. And there's some staircases. Here at the bottom, a couple levels of the tower, you basically get your human men-at-arms type of people. As you move up, you get some apprentice wizards, and you start to get into the area where he's got some storage, he's got his alchemy shop. You keep moving up and you get into his private chambers, his particular wizard's area, and the very top, I think, is the level where he does his room of wizardry, which includes this summoning of demons. But that's not the end, because if you find the right staircase, you can also go down into the dungeons, and now we really get into it. So the first level of the dungeon is populated by goblins, as explained in the background, right? And I love this huge cavern here. You see the goblin network, and there's this big room at the bottom. It has 64 goblins in it. And there's goblins all throughout all these other little rooms as well, including, where the chieftain and the king and all that kind of stuff live. And there's a little outlet there to get to the surface. And there's also a way to get down to the next level. So then in level 2, you get into the humans. And this is more the level where the human followers and supporters are. And so you have more of maybe a temple, it has more of a temple feel to it, as well as a way to get down to level 3. And so then in level 3, this is more of the burial tomb level. And you're going to see down here, there's some of those names I mentioned of prior wizards, plus the ones whose names weren't given. You're going to find them down here. And as you might imagine, given what this is and how long ago that was, we've got some undead action here on this level. And so this gets, you go from goblins and some men-at-arms down to pretty high-level undead on that level. So the difficulty level ramps up rather substantially. But we're not done. You get down here to level 4. This is kind of an interesting level. There's not much down here. We've got a golem. We've got a minotaur who's guarding some things. And we're going to find, a clutch of gargoyles down here. And then you can keep going down. Oh, there's the map. And then you can keep going down here to the final level, which is not particularly big, but this is where the big baddie, the evil demon that was summoned way, way back when, who's still here, resides. And so, like I said, not much here, but you get a pretty good, big, evil boss fight. If he starts gating things in, this could easily be a harder fight than fighting against that one magic user, who you may find in the middle of doing something that puts him at an extreme disadvantage, right? All right, let's look at the artwork. Again, Cheryl England does a lot of this artwork. I like to think that the first picture is maybe the guy doing the original summoning of his demons, but I don't know. And then we've got the wizard from today, and then there's all kinds of sort of demon, devilish looking stuff. Here's this lone adventurer coming to check out the tower. And then there's a whole bunch of little random faces here, and then also on the maps of the dungeon levels, these random faces. Got this creature, I think he's like a centaur, maybe a troll, not really sure. I've got a demon down here. This reminds me of the Ralparth of Balrog with, got the sword and the whip. Some bones, some cobwebs, a bunch of little nasty looking cherubs, nasty looking undead skeleton creature, more demons or devils. I think that's some coins, a random axe, and then we've got this manticore. and this wizard summoning a demon. You may have noticed that a couple of these pieces of art were previously used in other Judges Guild products. I think in the Judges Guild Journal from last month, if I'm not mistaken. But again, Cheryl England does a lot of artwork here for Judges Guild at this point in time. And then here is a full page drawing. We've got the wizard in the foreground, and then one of the humans that now works for him is out capturing slave girls, apparently. The very last page of this is the booty list. And so remember I told you there's first and second printing both look the same. This one, the first printing, it ends with number 59. If you go to a printing number 2, that number will go all the way up to 80, as I understand it. And then if you go to we'll take a look at what's different in the third printing here in just a minute, because there's a few differences there as well. Here's the back cover of the adventure, and then it has the Judges Guild symbol here on this little crest. So here's what's different about the third printing. And there's actually a fourth printing I don't have that has like some evil wizards on the front of it. But so the third printing, this is a really heavy stock cover, not just paper. It's obviously in color. And you're going to get some few differences on the inside. So that when you open it, then the first paper page is the black and white drawing from the original cover. You get this little forward here that's not in the other one. They mentioned Citadel Fire is the strongest dungeon published by Judges Guild to date, designed primarily for advanced players. The thing I'd say about that is I found this adventure to be a real mixed bag, where some of the encounters were more like third level party would probably be a right level, and then you've got things like the demons and 5 gargoyles and 15th level magic user, where you definitely would need a higher level party. But if you consider you've got 4 or 5 characters, you certainly, I would not think they would be 10th level, maybe 7th level at the most. That's a lot of levels to take on, because most of the big bad guys, right, are one at a time, unless you want to figure out a way to create additional monsters that are there protecting or fighting with them. You get this art here as well from Kevin Siembieda. I mispronounced that, Simbieda. His year 1980s drawn on there, and you see these creatures coming through the walls that are after this knight who's in the tower. Then the last page here actually has notes, I guess, for the dungeon master to write some notes out. And then the treasure vault, which is what they now call the booty list in later years, you'll see here, goes all the way up to Dungeoneer issue, which has got the number 125. A couple of new products being Castle Book 2 and City State of the World Emperor, and those are numbers 149 and 150 respectively. So this comes, as you can tell from always looking at this list, you can sort of tell how far into the history of Judges Guild we are based on those numbers. And here's the rear cover. We put them both together. This is actually a full spread of the front and back with this scene of the Citadel, or the Wizard's Tower. So that completes our look at the 2 products you got in June of 1978 in Installment S as a subscriber to Judges Guild. These are great products, I think, really interesting, and I think the products are really strong here in the early part of Judges Guild timeline. They get a little more inconsistent as time goes on, and they start putting out more products but different people. But I think that Summerlot's good, Bledsoe's awesome, and these products, like I said, I think really good. Not the greatest adventure ever, but it's definitely playable, really enjoyable, and it's certainly something you're not going to do in a day or an evening or a weekend, right? I mean, this is a multi-time, multi-session kind of adventure, and I would say even you might go with lower level party to do part of it and then realize, uh-oh, we're in over our head. They leave, and you come back either later or with more henchmen, or with you come back with a higher level party to try and clear out the last parts of the dungeon. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I hope you're enjoying this series, and I hope that you're subscribed. If you have friends who might enjoy our content, please send them our way, and hopefully they will be subscribers as well. We're trying to build the community. We're closing in on 750 subscribers on our way. I hope by the end of the year we'll be up to around 1,000, which would be fantastic. That's all we've got for today. I hope you have a great rest of the day, Until next time, my friends, keep rolling 20s.